Again, thanks for everybody who was able to attend this town hall. If you're not watching it live, please fast forward to make sure that you can. I want to point out the questions and answers feature that you can see. So like if you're looking at the Hangout screen, there's that like Google 9 squares thing. If you click on that, you should be able to alternate between the Q&A app and the hand-raising app. Hopefully during this meeting, we will be using both of them. A reminder that this call will be recorded, but all your comments will not, your name will not be attached to them and your questions. And we do hope that we can maximize as much participation as possible in this meeting within the constraints of Hangouts on Air. Okay, so starting our presentation here. Hold on. Okay, can you guys see that? Great. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is that our policy co-director, Katarina Tadek, has come to speak to us about Burundi, the background of the conflict that's currently happening, the escalation of violence and recent developments. She will also tell us about Canada's relationship with Burundi, recent statements related to the conflict, response from other organizations and international actors, and some rough policy recommendations that our team put together over the weekend for the purpose of making this discussion as informed as possible. We're going to end with an open consultation, and the goal is to end this meeting in 60 minutes. However, depending on participation and the amount of questions and comments that people have, we can extend it a little bit further. So the hosts of this meeting are myself and Victoria Fleming. We're the chapters directors. So hello to you, Tori. I think this is your first town hall meeting.
It is my first town hall meeting.
You want to say hello?
Hi, guys. I'm the co-director for chapters with Adi. Nice to meet you all.
Okay, thanks. All right, and I'll just make sure that I'm the presenter here so that this screen will stay. Okay. So the purpose of this town hall meeting is to determine whether Burundi fits the mandate and scope of STAND, to clarify the goals and challenges associated with this, and to get input from the community, which is you, in making these decisions, to support transparency and engagement throughout the organization. So in terms of clarifying goals and challenges, I just want to help people keep in mind during this meeting that if we were to take on Burundi as a conflict region, this would be a 5th region. So we want to make sure that this fits the mandate and the scope, and that we want to hear from the chapters concerns you might have regarding the level of education that you might need to bring into your chapter this year, considering that we've added a bunch of new focus regions. So obviously we need to make our decisions based on the urgency of the crisis. At the same time, though, we do want to hear any concerns that you might have and see that how we can plan to work around them or to support you with them. All right, so I'm going to pass this over to Katarina, and she's going to go through the regions under discussion and give us some context through which we can make these decisions. So thank you, Katarina.
Thanks, Adi. All right, we'll get started here. And do you want to just, there we go. Okay, so on this slide here, there's just a brief overview of the essential facts of Burundi. So it is a country, a small country by African standards, located in East Central Africa, and the capital is Bujumbura. The population is 10.3 million. The official languages are English, French, and Kirundi. The population is mostly Christian, about 80 to 90%, and 60% of this roughly is Catholic. The political system is a presidential republic. The current president is Pierre Nkurunziza, and the opposition leader is Agathon Rwasa. So Burundi is the second poorest country in the world, and the population is 85% Hutu and 15% Tutsi, so it's very similar to Rwanda in terms of ethnic makeup. Just a bit of context. So prior to the colonial conquest by the Germans and later the Belgians, the Tutsi monarchy ruled what is today Rwanda and Burundi. and the Germans and Belgians ruled through the existing Tutsi power structure. And as a result, the Tutsis today dominate the government and the military, and that's where a lot of the tensions come from. So the country became independent from Belgium in 1962, and it rejected a federation with Rwanda, which was a monarchy, in favor of a republic. But in 1966, the Tutsi military regime took power, and it was in power until 1993. In 1972, there was a genocide, but the total death toll is not known. It ranges very widely from 15,000, that's 15,000, to 300,000. So it's a very wide range. So as I said, the military regime was in power until 1993, which was when the first multi-party elections were held. And the result of these elections was that a Hutu president was elected. His name was Melchior Ndadaye. And he was assassinated a few months after assuming power by Tutsi extremists. And this set off the Civil War, which lasted from 1993 to 2005, and it took the lives of about 300,000 people. And there was a series of accords signed in the early 2000s, but the formal end of the Civil War is recognized as being the year 2005, which is when the former Hutu rebel leader Pierre Nkurunziza was elected. So fast forward to 2015. So in April, protests and violence began after Nkurunziza announced a run for his third presidency. And the problem stemming from this is the issue of how constitutional this decision, action was. So his opponents claimed that it was unconstitutional because, according to the Burundi constitution, a president could hold only 2 terms. But Nkurunziza supporters claimed that because his first term didn't count because he was elected by parliament and not by popular vote. But the Supreme Court upheld this decision, although afterwards at least one judge claimed that he was pressured into upholding the decision. So there was a failed army coup against Nkurunziza in May, the August elections were held despite protests from opposition parties and the international community. And since April, there have been at least 240 people killed, and more than 200,000 have fled to neighboring countries, mostly Rwanda, but also Tanzania. Since April, there have been daily reports of extrajudicial murders, arbitrary arrests and detentions, the use of torture, and attacks on independent media. And so it is the people behind this violence are mostly the CNDD-FDD, which is the National Council for the Defense of Democracy, and the Forces for the Defense of Democracy. They're also known as the Imbonerakure, which means those who see far, and they are a group of former youth rebels with ties to President Nkurunziza. And currently there is a fear of a Rwanda-style genocide because government leaders are using very similar rhetoric and coded language as was used during the Rwandan genocide. So language like sending their men to work or dealing with enemies of the state. This is all very reminiscent of how the Rwandan genocide started. So that was a very high-level overview of the 19th and 20th century history of Burundi. And so now for just a quick overview of Canada's relationship with Burundi. So relations were established between the two countries in 1969, and they've been described as cordial although modest by Ottawa. Canada has an honorary consul in Bujumbura, which is managed through the High Commission in Kenya and the consulate in Rwanda. And in 2014, Canada hosted Burundi's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Laurent Kabakure. Trade relations are modest but stable, and so just as a quick statistic, in 2014, Canada exported $3.18 million worth of goods to Burundi, mostly in textiles, grain, and vehicles, and imported about $200,000, mostly in coffee. So the Department of Foreign Trade, which was just brought to my attention, is now Global Affairs Canada. quote, does not maintain a significant international development assistance program for Burundi, although the country does benefit from Canadian broader regional programs, such as the Pan-Africa Regional Program, the International Humanitarian Assistance Program. And the aid going to Burundi is mostly humanitarian, health, and financial services. So there are no statistics available for 2015, but in 2012-13, Burundi received close to $10 million in aid from Canada, but for 2013-14, this dropped to $7.5 million. And Ottawa currently advises against traveling to Burundi on account of the violence. Canada's involvement in Burundi since 2000 included a role in the peace process that led to the first Arusha Agreement in 2000, and dated by Nelson Mandela and the President of Tanzania, and it was followed by a series of ceasefire agreements that eventually led to the end of the civil war in Burundi, although, as I said earlier, the war is formally seen as having ended in 2005 with the election of Nkurunziza. And on account of the events of 2015, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rob Nicholson, made statements on 2 occasions, in April and in July, condemning the illegitimate elections and the escalating violence. And here I just have a couple of excerpts from his statements that I'll just read out loud. Canada is alarmed by a level of political violence in Burundi not seen since the end of the Civil War and the beginning of the very first mandate of the current government in 2005. President Pierre Nkurunziza's actions threaten to ruin a decade of peace. We urge Burundi to comply with the Arusha Accords, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, to which Burundi is a signatory, and Burundi's international commitments, including within La Francophonie. In terms of what other international actors have been doing recently, so the EU has evacuated all diplomatic staff and has advised its nationals to leave. On October 1st, the EU imposed sanctions on the Bujumbura Police Deputy Director General and 3 others for undermining democracy and obstructing efforts to achieve a political solution to the unrest. On October 17th, the African Union Peace and Security Council issued a strong statement condemning the violence and committing to deploy human rights observers and military experts to Burundi. And on November 12th, so just last week, the UN adopted a resolution on condemning the violence, and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has 2 weeks to determine possible intervention, so whether to send peacekeepers or observers, etc. Other humanitarian and human rights organizations haven't been extensively active on Burundi yet, but just to take an example, Human Rights Watch made a statement calling for the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights to accelerate its investigation into human rights violations and other abuses in Burundi, as per its October 17th statement that was mentioned in the previous slide, and that it should publish a timely report on its findings. And following this, the Alliance for Peacebuilding proposed a series of recommendations, including the full development and support for African Union and UN human rights monitors and military observers to go to Burundi, for all regional and international actors to publicly denounce and refrain from all forms of violence and commit to a process of inclusive dialogue in a location that allows all parties to participate, and to address long-term support of underlying issues that cause the violence, such as chronic poverty, democratic governance, reconciliation, economic integration, land and agricultural reform, and education. So over the weekend, I worked with my policy co-director, Priya Ramesh, to draft a series of just very rough policy recommendations for STAND that I hope to discuss and get feedback on today. So there's a series of 5 of them. And the first one is for Canada to increase development aid to Burundi from Global Affairs Canada's regional programs to address the underlying causes of violence, in particular poverty, healthcare, and education. 2, for Canada to include Burundi in its list of focus regions. 3, for Canada to consider pressuring the UN to send an observation group to make a proper inquiry into the situation on the ground. So, for example, does the political and cultural climate suggest an impending genocide, and to what extent are civilians a part of the genocidal rhetoric? 4, to work with the right international actors, specifically the UN Security Council and the government of Tanzania, which is sort of the regional power and Burundi's large next-door neighbor, to pressure opposing sides of the conflict to maintain peace and security in the region. And lastly, to work quickly on an international level to stop the genocidal rhetoric and any actions that may stem from said genocidal rhetoric. So that is the end of my sort of formal presentation, so I'll hand things back over to Adi.
Great, thank you, Katerina. So I thought what we might try to do today, first I want to give you guys a couple of minutes here to use the questions and answers box and type any questions that you might have going forward. So just to clarify that the purpose of this open consultation is to try to address questions and comments in the order which we get them. We encourage you to vote for other people's questions and comments as well, so you can use the +1 button below the question. And if you think of something later or would like to comment privately, you can send your questions and comments to standwithus@standcanada.org. The final decision regarding the adoption of Burundi as a focus region will be done as per the procedure outlined and adopted in the June Town Hall meeting by the Advocacy Steering Committee, which is led by the Advocacy Directors. So please do participate, though, since this is a really important time, especially for chapters to bring their voice into the discussion and let us know what kind of concerns are on their mind, what kind of questions that they have, what kind of resources they would need should we adopt Burundi, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to let you guys type for a minute, and I'll check and see if we got any questions already. Not yet. If somebody could just type something to make sure that it's working, and I know that you guys are here. So basically, maybe Katerina, while we wait a couple seconds here, can you, in the past, Priya has used a kind of scale from, I think, Genocide Watch regarding the risk of genocide. Can you speak a little bit to the immediacy of a risk of genocide in Burundi, in particular compared to our other focus regions, or our current focus regions?
This isn't something that we've sort of had a chance to do in-depth research on. The situation on the ground right now, it's very fluid, and I really don't have an exact answer to that right now, although the situation is certainly alarming, but I don't think at this stage sort of it ranks too high up on the sort of the 1 to 10 genocide scale that Priya has used before, although concerning warning signs are definitely there.
So do you think that the risk of genocide is particularly pronounced? Like, I've seen a bunch of human rights organizations, particularly American ones, are using the word genocide and warning signs of genocide. Do you think that that's how much of that do you think is influenced by the symmetry with Rwanda?
I think that's a very large part of it, but again, it's I don't think we can afford to ignore it, obviously, and it is something that we definitely should monitor.
Great. So I know that part of the Wet Stand was looking to do in the short term here was reach out to particular organizations. In particular, we were talking about one. Refugee Law Association that was talking about Canada's policy regarding refugees from Burundi. So in the recent past, Canada had rejected applications for refugee status as political refugees. Isn't that right, Scott? We talked about that at the meeting last week?
Yes, that's correct. So it was an organization representing refugee lawyers within Ontario. And that news release was something from around November 6 or 7, 2015.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's obviously a relevance to this discussion. So maybe what we can do now is, if you're able to see the hand-raising function, again, you can access it through the excuse me, the little 9 square thing above the screen. So for you guys presenters, you don't have that option, but for the people who are watching, if you could raise your hand if you think that Burundi should be a focus for STAND, at least in the short term. This might be more confusing. I can't actually give instructions to you guys because I can't see the same screen as you do. But if you can't see the hand raising function, maybe write in the questions box. And if you're here representing a chapter, please indicate which chapter you're representing. And I will also gather comments from people later whether this Hangouts on Air is a good venue for the town hall or if we should do these over the Zoom app where we can see everyone. So just indicate in the Q&A, write a question, and the question would be your general sense. So we got a vote from Tori. Katerina says that she likes the Zoom app better. We'll certainly take that into consideration. Okay, so I'm wondering if we're having problems with participation right now, like the technical problem with participation, because I see that there are several people watching here. All right. If you're having trouble, maybe you can email me or text me if you have. If you have my number. And no need to be shy. This is an open discussion. So the question that we're facing here is, should Burundi be adopted as an official focus region of STAN Canada? The type of things we have to judge here are, is it within scope? Is the conflict in Burundi at risk of genocide comparable to our other focus regions? Is it within our capability to influence Canadian policy here? Is Canadian policy important in the development of this ongoing situation? Okay, so maybe we'll have a little discussion between the four of us here to try to tease out some of the issues that might arise from this, and then we'll have those comments on the record, and we can gather further feedback from people via email or if they decide to participate now. Does that sound okay with you guys?
Sure.
All right, so maybe we can go around. Scott, what are your thoughts so far?
Well, my thoughts so far is that, from what I've been noticing with other like-minded organizations, whether it be UK or US, that it's still early days, despite the violence that we're seeing, in the sense that we've seen some sorts of policy recommendations on what the world should do, but it's mostly been directed towards the UN Security Council. And not much to date has been discussed regarding the actions of individual governments, whether it be Canadian, United States, or any others. So generally speaking, when it comes to the direction that we're going in, it's something that we'll always need to be keeping an eye out for in terms of what like-minded organizations are doing, because when it comes to anything that we want to tell the Canadian government, it needs to be based on what either other NGOs or what the Academy is saying. So,
Since we're not a research organization, we have limited capacities there, and we don't want to take on too much responsibility for putting forth recommendations or information that isn't backed up by others.
took the words right out of my mouth. Yes. So if we do go down the road of adopting Burundi as a focus region as part of our mandate, we're obviously not going to make sure to fly the handle, and we're going to make sure that we're going to be keeping in line with what similar organizations are recommending, so that we're all going to be consistent in some manner. That's something for everyone to keep in mind. Katerina, do you have any thoughts yourself?
I agree with what you said. It is, as you said, early days, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not 100% convinced right now that we should adopt it as a focus region, largely because of the uncertainty of the situation, and also because of our resources. I mean, we can certainly do sort of the odd policy, at least can certainly sort of do the odd assignment on Burundi here or there. Our researchers aren't sort of pigeonholed into one focus region necessarily. I mean, they can all go outside of their focus regions, but I don't know if we have the resources to make it a formal focus region.
Mm-hmm. I did just now get an email from one of our chapters saying that the Q&A feature wasn't working for them. So basically, this is from Stan Laurier. The sense in the chapter is that the current activity is important in gaining popularity in news coverage. Even if there's no direct threat to genocide, we think that awareness of potential activity is important. Is it possible to do a kind of temporary? So I'm wondering if maybe we should consider adopting a new classification of focus regions of like kind of short-term watch.
I think that's a really good idea. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too, especially because, well, I'm sure the media is a little bit more panicked since Burundi and Rwanda do have history with genocide, so I think it would be prudent to keep it as short-term watch because it is quite easy to reignite ethnic tensions.
I think that that's the biggest risk here also, from my point of view as a completely non-expert in this issue, but that seems to me yeah. There's echoes of Rwanda here, and that's prompting concern, and that's justified.
Mm-hmm. So for everyone's awareness, we for the past few days, Stan has been working on writing an action alerts related to Burundi. It's more of take note, make watching this a priority variety for Canadian politicians, because our underlying premise in doing this is that if Burundi is already on the desk for Canadian MPs, that it will be easier to get them up to speed and take action if it is in fact merited. Because if we do determine, well, if NGOs and governments determine that genocide is in fact happening, and that's the first time that MPs are hearing about what's happening in Burundi, that's not good, and it's not something I'd be pleased with personally.
Definitely. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do here is, no, that's not going to work. Okay, so again, my email, if you want to email in questions, is chapters@stancanada.org. So chapters with an S at the end, plural. Okay, so basically on the table right now, to summarize, the cause for concern regarding the developing situation in Burundi is valid, and we should be paying attention to this, but there's some hesitancy in terms of adopting it as a focus region. Is that in the background there? Okay. And adopting it as a focus region when the short-term situation could be changing really quickly, and there's also concern of a lack of resource allocation. from Stan. So Maureen says that the watch idea sounds good to them. Sorry, there's some like background noise. Right? People talking? Can you hear it?
I hear it, but I don't know where.
Oh, maybe it's coming from me. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm in a partial common area,
All right.
and sometimes I don't have the mind to mute my mic.
Okay, so I
don't
think in
hear
terms
as
of
much
next
because of
steps,
earphones.
yeah, I think in terms of next steps, maybe what we can put forth to the group here is we'll put together a little summary of what we talked about today, send it out, give people about, is it fair, maybe like 24 hours for feedback?
That may be a good idea, yeah.
And then if we're considering instituting a new category for focus regions for stands, then we definitely need to review that procedural change within the Advocacy Steering Committee. And I'm wondering if in the short term we can adopt, so for those of you who don't have access to the focus region procedure document, which outlines how STAND adopts focus regions, we have a category for where we have the option to adopt a region not as a focus region, but with the option to support other organizations in the work that they're doing. So unless STAN specifically has a pressing policy issue for Canada, I think that that option might be sufficient for the short term here. That makes sense? Okay. So we'll put, right now, we'll summarize, we'll say that we should adopt Burundi as, so that would be category 3B with the option for supportive action, pending further developments, or if STAND has a policy recommendation that's specifically targeted to Canada, for example, an opposition to the refugee policy that was over the last several months. Okay, so I think we can end it about there. Any final comments from the panelists? And I'm checking my email one more time here. Okay. All right, so thanks for participating in the discussion. And we will send out that email and gather input that way. And if you have any recommendations on how we can improve the format of the town hall meetings, please do let us know. And I was really happy to see that I think we have all the chapters represented at this meeting, so that's really great. So thank you all for coming, and have a good evening, and we will follow up. Great, so I'll stop the broadcast here.